You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I'm glad to be here. I sat down today to talk about the alt-right in Virginia, and as I was setting up to record this podcast, Donald Trump, President of the United States, finally issued a statement about what was going on. In case you missed it, the white nationalists, also known as the alt-right, staged a torchlit march on the campus of the University of Virginia. Violence ensued. The governor there, named Terry McCantiff, I think it is, declared a state of emergency. Police in riot gear were sent basically to protect the alt-right, by the way, from the protesters. The alt-right protest was due to the fact that the city, this city in Virginia, I think it's called Charlottesville, they made a decision to remove a statue of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee from a park, I think it was. But the truth of the matter is that it's more than them protesting against the removal of Confederate symbols. It's really about protecting white identity and advocating whiteness. See, white folks in America feel like they're losing. And much of this show is going to be about that idea of losing, and what we black folks need to start thinking about in terms of winning. Let me play a clip from CNN about what Trump had to say with regards to the protests that were going on against the alt-right. Take a listen.
We finally heard from the president.
Hi, Boris. That's right. Let's read again what the president just tweeted in the last 5 minutes. He said, "We all must be united and condemn all that hate stands for. There is no place for this kind of violence in America. Let's come together as one." So we finally heard from the president there after first hearing some time ago from the First Lady, Melania Trump. Rather unusual to hear the First Lady speaking out, or being the first high-level official, not an elected official, to speak out in terms of a situation like this. We also heard just a couple minutes before the president's tweet, we heard from his assistant to the president on Homeland Security and Counterterrorism, Thomas Bossert, also talking about how the violence and hate in Charlotte, he said Charlotte, not Charlottesville, are unacceptable. Protests must not undermine law and order, confidence in state and local law enforcement.
No, he didn't condemn the alt-right directly. He just gave that, that general down-the-middle type statement of, we got to come together and all. That's the same shit Obama and others have done in the past, too. You never take a hard line against the perpetrators of hate, but you take this general approach to just saying, hey, let's just all get along, kind of like Rodney King. But before we even get a little deeper into what's going on currently and what has been going on historically with the alt-right, let's talk a little bit about who or what is the alt-right. Well, the alt-right stands for alternative right. In politics, the right is usually the conservatives, and the conservatives are those who have the idea of keeping with tradition. And typically tradition is whiteness, keeping in the tradition of whiteness. So the alternative right is the alternative to that. It's not that it's opposite to it. It's just that they believe that conservatives are too soft and a little bit too indirect. They want direct white identity promotion. They want whiteness advocacy, and they feel like conservatives are not really doing it. The interesting thing about the alt-right is that they operate mostly online. That means that mostly the alt-right are millennials with college degrees or college students. Like I said, they're not into traditional conservatism because it isn't hardline enough for them. I recently posted on the Bitter Medicine Show page on Facebook that the people who are alt-right and racist and all that kind of stuff, they're high energy individuals. And what we have to do as black people is meet that high energy with a high energy of our own with black consciousness. So you can't be sitting around being passive while these people are being aggressive. Also, I want to say this to white liberals out there who might be listening to this. I've heard you guys say it, and I've heard some black people repeat it. You guys like to talk about how racism is dying off with the old folks who were racist around the civil rights movement time. And you know this is a lie, and I know it's a lie. And for those of you who don't know, it's a fucking lie. Racism is culture, and culture is passed down from generation to generation. So this idea that somehow racism is just embodied in these individuals, and when they die, so does racism, that's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And we black people have to stop falling for that trick. So where the alt-right is concerned, there's a few notable characters who are unapologetically alt-right people. You have Steve Bannon, who's the Trump advisor and strategist. If Steve Bannon is alt-right, he's a Trump advisor and strategist, what does that say about Trump's administration? To me, it says that Trump's administration is alt-right, or has some alt-right leanings at the very least. The other notable alt-right person is a guy named Richard Spencer. You've probably seen him getting his ass punched in the face at different rallies around the country over the last year, but him and his alt-right movement actually helped Trump win the presidency heavy. And he probably doesn't get enough credit for that. When he was asked about it at some point, he said that, this is Richard Spencer now, he said that he doesn't think Trump himself is alt-right, but he definitely believes that Trump is headed in the right direction, in the alt-right direction, and that he is inspiring the best of white people, white men especially, to be alt-right themselves. But you know what? Let me play a clip of Richard Spencer telling you what he thinks the alt-right is.
The alt-right was a total rejection of mainstream conservatism and neoconservatism. And by that, I'm thinking of George W. Bush and the Iraq War and the religious right and all that kind of nonsense. We wanted to get away from that. And that was back in 2008 when we were first forming this ideology. We wanted to have a totally new beginning. And that beginning that we found is identity. That is, who are you? That's the question that you have to ask before you ask any other question about, what economic policy do you want? What social policy do you want? What foreign policy do you want? Who are you really? And I think around the world, not just amongst Europeans or Americans or Australians, but around the world, everyone's questing for identity. that answer the question of who are you? We've been uprooted in the modern world, and I think we're trying to find roots. I think this is a quest that all humans have. That's what the alt-right is about.
That's what the alt-right is about. That's what black people need to be about. Be about your identity over everything. You're black first. All that intersectionality bullshit, black LGBTQ, all this whole shit, you're black first. And we need to be about that. And frankly, I'll say it here boldly today, I admire Richard Spencer. I admire Richard Spencer much the same way that the Honorable Marcus Garvey admired Mussolini and Hitler. I'll repeat that. Marcus Garvey, he admired and respected Mussolini and Hitler. If you don't know who Marcus Garvey is, Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican-born black nationalist that advocated unity and self-determination. The interesting fact about Garvey admiring Mussolini and Hitler was he didn't admire them for their hate and the hateful things they did to groups of people, including Africans, but he admired them for their nationalist view. The truth of the matter is, a lot of people, I've heard Jews say this about Garvey, and it's untrue. The truth of the matter is, Garvey supported Jews. He was not anti-Semitic. He supported Jews, and he saw them as a positive socioeconomic and political role models for the black people. But he still identified with the rise of a Hitler and a Mussolini coming from lower class beginnings, rising to these power statuses with a nationalistic brand of leadership. So it's not that he hated Jews or something like that, but he had to respect that these guys came from a lowly place, attained power, all the while holding on to nation first, a nationalistic brand of leadership. To Garvey, he felt that Mussolini and Hitler restored their nation's pride, and he felt that black people could do the same for Africa. Garvey admired the fact that those two individuals, Hitler and Mussolini, restored their nation's pride, and he felt that we as black people can do the same for Africa. So when you listen to Richard Spencer, and you hear what he's talking about, and it mirrors a lot of what Mussolini and Hitler were talking about. When you hear Marcus Garvey admired the last two names I called, you will then understand why I can admire Richard Spencer. Because I see in what he says about himself and his people, I see where we should be seeing that for ourselves and our people. I want to also mention that Marcus Garvey, interestingly enough, he also liked the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. Let me read to you an excerpt of something he said about the Klan. Marcus Garvey said, "I regard the Klan, the Anglo-Saxon clubs, and white American societies, as far as the Negro is concerned, as better friends of the race than all other groups of hypocritical whites put together. I like honesty and fair play. You may call me a Klansman if you will, but potentially every white man is a Klansman as far as the Negro in competition with whites socially, economically, and politically is concerned. And there is no use lying about it." And I respect that. In fact, these protests about taking down Confederate symbols, I disagree with it. I say fly your Confederate flag. I say keep up your statues of General E. Lee. I say wear your shirts. that have the Union Jack or whatever it is on the front. I say go for it. Because that will signal to me who you are and who I need to avoid. But instead, what a lot of us black folks want to do, we want to live in the bubble. We want to be able to walk up in the most racist places and pretend like it isn't racist, just so that we could feel a little bit better about being included when in reality we aren't. I prefer the bluntness, just like Marcus Garvey. Just like Marcus Garvey was a black nationalist, so am I. I prefer the bluntness. I prefer to be in your face. And I can respect it because at the end of the day, they're doing it to stay on top. And we're going to talk about staying on top a little bit later. And we're going to talk about, is it fair or not? I want to read for you guys an essay. Speaking of Marcus Garvey, I want to read to you guys an essay from Marcus Garvey that I think is completely necessary for all of our children to read and to even memorize it. It should be in black churches. It should be anywhere blacks congregate. And I'm going to share it with you guys because maybe you've never heard this before. This essay is called African Fundamentalism. It's by Marcus Garvey. A racial hierarchy and empire for Negroes. Negroes' faith must be confidence in self, his creed, one God, one aim, one destiny. That was the byline. Let me read this to you verbatim. Here's what Garvey wrote in this essay. The time has come for the Negro to forget and cast behind him his hero worship and adoration of other races, and to start out immediately to create and emulate heroes of his own. We must canonize our own saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate to positions of fame and honor black men and women who have made their distinct contributions to our racial history. Sojourner Truth is worthy of the place of sainthood alongside of Joan of Arc. Crispus Attucks and George William Gordon are entitled to the halo of martyrdom with no less glory than that of the martyrs of any other race. Toussaint Louverture's brilliancy as a soldier and statesman outshone that of Cromwell, Napoleon, and Washington. Hence, he is entitled to the highest place as a Negro among men. Africa has produced countless numbers of men and women in war and in peace whose luster and bravery outshine that of any other people. Then why not see good and perfection in ourselves? We must inspire a literature and promulgate a doctrine of our own without any apologies to the powers that be. The right is ours and God's. Let contrary sentiment and cross opinions go to the winds. Opposition to race independence is the weapon of the enemy to defeat the hopes of an unfortunate people. We are entitled to our own opinions and not obligated to or bound by the opinions of others. If others laugh at you, return the laughter to them. If they mimic you, return the compliment with equal force. They have no more right to dishonor, disrespect, and disregard your feeling and manhood than you have in dealing with them. Honor them when they honor you. Disrespect and disregard them when they vilely treat you. Their arrogance is but skin deep and an assumption that has no foundation in morals or in law. They have sprung from the same family tree of obscurity as we have. Their history is as rude in its primitiveness as ours. Their ancestors ran wild and naked, lived in caves and in branches of trees like monkeys as ours. They made human sacrifices, ate the flesh of their own dead, and the raw meat of the wild beasts for centuries, even as they accuse us of doing. Their cannibalism was more prolonged than ours. When we were embracing the arts and sciences on the banks of the Nile, their ancestors were still drinking human blood and eating out of the skulls of their conquered dead. When our civilization had reached the noonday of progress, they were still running naked and sleeping in holes and caves with rats, bats, and other insects and animals. After we had already fathomed the mystery of the stars and reduced the heavenly constellations to minute and regular calculus, they were still backwoodsmen, living in ignorance and blatant darkness. The world today is indebted to us for the benefits of civilization. They stole our arts and sciences from Africa. Then why should we be ashamed of ourselves? Their modern improvements are but duplicates of a grander civilization that we reflected thousands of years ago, without the advantage of what is buried and still hidden, to be resurrected and reintroduced by the intelligence of our generation and our posterity. Why should we discourage because somebody laughs at us today? Who can tell what tomorrow will bring forth? Did they not laugh at Moses, Christ, and Muhammad? Was there not a Carthage, Greece, and Rome? We see and have changes every day, so pray, work, be steadfast, and be not dismayed. As the Jew was held together by his religion, the white races by the assumption and the unwritten law of superiority, and the Mongolian by the precious tie of blood, so likewise the Negro must be united in one grand racial hierarchy. Our union must know no clime, boundary, or nationality. Like the great Church of Rome, Negroes the world over must practice one faith, that of confidence in themselves, with one God, one aim, one destiny. Let no religious scruples, no political machination divide us, but let us hold together under all climes and in every country, making among ourselves a racial empire upon which the sun shall never set. Let no voice be your own speak to you from the depths. Let no influence but your own rouse you in time of peace and time of war. Hear all, but attend only to that which concerns you. Your allegiance shall be to your God, then to your family, race, and country. Remember always that the Jew in his political and economic urge is always first a Jew. The white man is first a white man under all circumstances, and you can do no less than being first and always a Negro, and then all else will take care of itself. Let no one inoculate you with evil doctrines to suit their own conveniences. There is no humanity before that which starts with yourself. Charity begins at home. First to thyself be true, and thou canst not then be false to any man. God and nature first made us what we are, and then out of our own created genius we make ourselves what we want to be. Follow always that great law. Let the sky and God be our limit and eternity our measurement. There is no height to which we cannot climb by using the active intelligence of our own minds. Mind creates, and as much as we desire in nature, we can have through the creation of our own minds. Being at present the scientifically weaker race, you shall treat others only as they treat you. But in your homes and everywhere possible, you must teach the higher development of science to your children, and be sure to develop a race of scientists par excellence. For in science or religion lies our only hope to withstand the evil designs of modern materialism. Never forget your God. Remember, we live, work, and pray for the establishing of a great and binding racial hierarchy, the founding of a racial empire whose only natural, spiritual, and political limits shall be God and Africa at home and abroad. This people was published in the Negro World in New York back in 1925. Marcus Garvey's words here are almost 100 years old. And still, they are so true today. It's not funny. Let's take a break for a quick station identification.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
So, when we listen to that essay by the Honorable Marcus Garvey, when we take into consideration who he admired on the other side, being Hitler and Mussolini, even the Klan, other white nationalist groups, we get the blueprint really of how we need to be. But before we get into that, I want to talk more about Richard Spencer. And I want to play some clips from an interview Richard Spencer did where he talked about the alt-right. He talked about what it means to be alt-right. He talks about what's the mentality behind it. He talks about fairness, and that's a very interesting part of the interview that he did. And he talks about the justification for nationalism. Let me play the first clip. Richard Spencer is talking about why white men embrace the alt-right.
Well, I think white men are really facing some tremendous struggles. And that is, it seems like all culture is against us. You know, whenever people use words like, oh, we need more diversity at this corporation or something, what that means is less white men, period. So it seems like all of politics and culture just are all united against us, that our status is falling. And I think also white men, we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to be part of a bigger team. We don't want to just be some guy who works in a cubicle. We want to be part of a bigger story, a part of a nation, part of a people. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that a lot of white men are adopting nationalism or the alt-right or identitarianism, as I call it. We're all searching for something, and we all recognize ourselves as really victims of victims in the modern world. That is, it's all of corporate America or corporate Australia, politics and so on. It's all against us. It all thinks that if we just go away, that would be a good thing.
So you hear what Richard Spencer is saying there? He's saying to be a part of a nation or people, to be a part of something bigger, recognizing your victimhood and that it's us against the world. This is what black people need to take from that, need to internalize, and need to practice. Practice the idea of nationhood, to be a part of something bigger. Recognize that you are a victim. See, a lot of black folks are walking around out here denying victimhood. Some don't even recognize it to begin with. Because white supremacy affects us in all aspects of our lives, in education, in law, everything. So we need to recognize the fact that we are victims. We need to embrace it. And then we need to use that knowledge to take on this kind of Tupac Machiavellian mentality of us against the world. Okay? The next clip I want to play is of Richard Spencer basically talking about the mentality that it takes to basically be an alt-right person. In this, you're going to hear the propaganda that they use to recruit other whites to be alt-right, white supremacists. And frankly, you're going to hear lies as well. Take a listen.
Well, we have greater expectations because we're the greatest. I mean, white men are ultimately the people who are responsible for almost every great scientific discovery, almost every discovery of the world, almost every great piece of art is our project. So, yeah, we have greater expectations because we're the greatest. white men, we change the world. If you look at scientific discoveries, if you look at works of art, if you look at great novels, if you look at great poetry, I could go on and on. Yes, that is something that white men have given to the world.
And the more I listen to the guy in the context of what's going on with black people historically and currently, I dare say I love what the guy is saying. He's basically saying we have to have greater expectations because we're great. So from a black point of view, we know, those of us who are in the know, we know the greatness of black people. We know our contributions to the world. He's lying when he talks about what whites have done. Whites have, as Marcus Garvey stated in his essay, whites have taken these ideas and repackaged them and sold them back to the world, but they took it from us. And we didn't have a blueprint. We figured this shit out on our own. While they were still roaming the forests and climbing out of caves and on mountainsides, we figured it out. They're able to go and dig up the hidden things, the things that we allowed to get buried. They were able to go and take that and repackage it and make it seem like they've done this great stuff. They don't talk about the more influence that gave them a lot of their culture, that gave them their appreciation for art and science. They don't talk about that because they were in a dark age. In fact, they were in like 2 dark ages, and we pulled them out of it. So, to you black folks who are listening, please recognize your greatness. Recognize your contributions to the world. And when you do that, then you will have a higher expectation for yourselves and your people. So I absolutely love what Richard Spencer is saying here. And I think we need to embrace what he's saying. He's talking for white folks, that's fine. But we got to fight fire with fire. We have to match what he's saying from our perspective. We have truth on our side. We have history on our side. Our history doesn't begin with slavery. We were doing great things well before it. By the way, if you're listening to this on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. Also, share this link to your social media. Share it with your friends. I think this is stuff that we have to listen to. We have to listen to how these folks think to give ourselves an understanding of how we need to think to counter it. In the next clip I'm going to play, Richard Spencer talks about fairness. And I think fairness is the biggest problem that black people have. We have this childish mentality that the world should be fair. I've spoken to many young people, children too, as a matter of fact, and told them that there's no such thing really as fairness. That's a theory. 50-50 is a theorem. Outside of anything quantifiable, 50-50 is just a thought. But we embrace this 50-50 thing. And Richard Spencer is going to talk about his take on fairness. Take a listen.
Fairness is a very low value in my opinion. The things that I care about are not fairness or equality or all this kind of nonsense. What I care about is greatness, is beauty, is achievement. Those are the great values that we should hold, and not something as simple as, fairness. Fairness is for losers.
Ouch. But I love it. Fairness, equality, integration, that's for losers. I want y'all to really think on that for a second. What he said there is absolutely true. We got to get off of this fairness thing and this fight for equality and this fight to integrate and to be able to have all the sexual access to white women and white men and all this old bullshit. That's childish. We got to stop being childish. Life is about winning. You know the old saying, if you can't beat them, you join them. That's a loser's mentality. That's when you've given up. So right now, a lot of black folks have basically given up and have joined in on their oppression. Again, we have to fight fire with fire. We have to adopt the same mentality. And for your religious folks out there, I'm going to touch on what I just said from a religious aspect or spiritual or a biblical aspect. Okay? The next clip I'm going to play is Richard Spencer talking about the justification for nationalism. I read the Honorable Marcus Garvey's essay, and he essentially, that whole essay is justifying your nationalism. But I want you to hear it from an alt-right guy in Richard Spencer. Okay? Take a listen.
I care about Europeans and my people because they're mine. That's how everyone else feels. That's how every other race acts. That's how every other ethnicity acts. That's how grades of women will act. Same thing. Like, we're sticking up for women. We're doing this for our sisters and so on. But I think that in the modern world, we've really lost our sense of greatness and destiny. That's what the alt-right's about. The alt-right's not, it's not even a political movement. The alt-right is really about that quest for identity and that quest for greatness and grandeur.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
That's the justification for why you should be a black nationalist as well. You need to have a sense of destiny, identity, and grandeur. Don't let slavery and its subsequent periods of oppression define you. Draw from your historical self. Draw from your overall identity and get back to being something grand, something great. So nationalism is not a bad thing. This is why the Honorable Marcus Garvey could look admirably upon Mussolini and Hitler. Because nationalism is what it's supposed to be. But today, the Negroes that we have around, who have, visibility and a following, it seems, these Negroes are so afraid of being black. And they push that on you, subliminally, sometimes directly. I was watching Jason Whitlock, I think it was yesterday, talking about the Colin Kaepernick situation. And by the way, if you're black and you're listening to this, and if you're white and you're listening to this, and you call yourself a liberal, all of us need to boycott the NFL too. And I'm a fan of the NFL. But fuck it. I'm not going to put my being a fan over Kaepernick being basically ousted from the NFL for his stance. But anyway, I saw Jason Whitlock talking about the upcoming Spike Lee-led, Spike Lee-attached protests of the NFL in front of the NFL offices in New York. And Whitlock was saying, oh, this is a shakedown. This is that type of Al Sharpton type shakedown, blah, blah, blah. And it's Negroes like that who have no problem, because they have a little money in their pockets, they have no problem with the rest of us being oppressed and suffering. It's Negroes like that who will down-talk black nationalism, who will up-talk integration into a burning house. It's Negroes like that we need to starve economically as well. Anyone who's a talking head for us, who's not about black first nationalism, we need to starve them out. If they're going to make money, let them make money from the alt-right and those type of groups. Let them make money from white supremacy so we could label them in kind. But we need to not support these folks in any way. Now, the take-home message I have from all of this that I've played for you, us listening to Richard Spencer in a previous interview, and what I read to you from Marcus Garvey, the take-home message is that we need to become the alt-black. That's right. We need to become the alt-black. We need to become the alternative blacks. What do I mean by the alternative blacks? Well, most Negroes are on some integrationist, kumbaya, let's play along to get along type nonsense. And as I just said about Whitlocks and people of that low ilk, we need to starve those people out economically. In fact, to be quite frank, we need to stomp them out. But we need to become the alt-black who's about identity first, who's about greatness, who's about winning. We got to stop with all this fairness bullshit. We got to stop putting on our own. We got to support each other. We have to build ourselves up. And for you religious folks, remember I said I was going to get to you guys later. Some of you might be thinking about Proverbs 3:31, which says, envy not the oppressor and choose none of his ways. I've heard that quote since I was a child. It's in music, etc. Envy not the oppressor and choose none of his ways. That tells you, that's some sucker shit right there. That's basically telling you, stay where you are. Maintain where you are. And I'm here to tell you, all of you today, religious and in between, that is not wisdom, that's just dumb. You have to study your enemy. You have to study their methodology. You have to understand it. If you study the oppressor and meet their oppression equally in kind, the way Garvey spoke about, that's the only way you're going to rise up out of your condition. Because another thing, the truth of the matter is, we are behind in the race. If you run at the same pace that you've been running from a losing position, you're going to finish as a loser. You have to start taking some effort to not only catch up, because again, if your mentality is just let me catch up and be even with the folks ahead of you, what if you fall short? And in fact, it's likely that you'll fall short because you started from behind. Your efforts have to be to overtake and to beat them out. So yes, we have to look at the oppressor. We had to look at the methodology of our oppression. We have to give up this thinking of we just want to be equal, because right now we're behind. We have to go all out to be on top. Because the people who are on top of you, even though they're on top of you and they've been so for a while, they're still devising plans daily to remain on top of you and push you down even further. Once again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking time to listen to this podcast. Please, please, please give us a thumbs up, give us a share, and give us some commentary on our blog site. Give us some commentary on our YouTube page. It'll be much appreciated. Let's have a dialogue. Give us some conversation on our Facebook page. Let's have more dialogue. I think right now we really need the alternative black movement. We need to, just like the alt-right does with conservatives or those on the right, we need to say fuck that, and we need to be more about drawing a hard line. And as I talked about in the podcast I did on the 1804 Haitian Revolution and identifying your enemies today, we have to identify and call out by name who our enemy or enemies are. Just to finish off this podcast, I want to say that please learn to put your identity, your race above everything. Before you could begin to worry about what's happening to Palestinians, what's happening to Muslims and the Muslim ban and all this stuff, you have to be about you first. You come first, black man, black woman, black child. You also need to speak truth to power. We got to recognize our greatness in the past, but we can't dwell on that. See, there's a lot of dusty Negroes out here on street corners dwelling on the past and talking all sorts of different things about being Hebrew and all that stuff. And I'm not trying to diss y'all per se, but I talked about this in a previous podcast. I believe it was the Low Energy Tainting Black Society podcast. That stuff is low energy. To just rehash and just talk about the greatness that we had, etc. What we need to do is recognize the greatness and not just talk about and rehash it, but actually apply it to everything we do today. Everything you do today, black people, you have greatness inside of you. You have greatness in your black love. Once you embrace it, you have greatness in your children. Your children can be greatness in the future, and you could be greatness now. We all can be. We have to draw from what we were in the past, not to dwell on it, but to use it as fuel for us to be great now and going on into the future. Lastly, we hear this a lot from the racists in the media. We hear this particular word I'm going to use, but I'm going to use this word with more purpose. We have to be savage. We have to forget about fairness. We have to be unapologetically black. We have to go after and take down who's in front of us. That might even include taking down people who look like us, who are trying to impede our growth, our progress. We have to be savage. As I talked about in the 1804 Haitian Revolution and Identifying Your Enemies Today podcast, go back and listen to it. When we recognize our enemies are not just white people. Our enemies are so-called Hispanics, so-called Latinos, Latinas. Our enemies are certain low-life blacks as well. We have to identify these groups and we have to be savage towards them. We have to put our blackness first. You know, as a side note, I posted about this on Facebook recently. They've been talking about Kaepernick. I saw Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp, who I have a lot of respect for. But I saw a moment on that show that really irked me. Skip Bayless and Joy were talking about the fact that Kaepernick probably shot himself in the foot in terms of having an opportunity in Miami when he wore a Castro meeting Malcolm X in New York t-shirt. I don't know if you guys remember that, but at the height of the controversy of Kaepernick taking a knee, he wore a t-shirt while in Miami of that iconic picture of Malcolm X and Castro meeting at the Teresa Hotel in New York. And apparently, a Cuban journalist got all offended and tight about it, and likewise, a lot of Cubans in Miami felt that way too. And Skip and Joy was going in on the fact that he wore that shirt, that Cap wore that shirt, he was insensitive in doing so, and Shannon tried to put up a fight against it, but then Joy and Skip put this thing out there like, well, we can't be upset, we can't tell the Cubans not to be upset by it, by the villainous rule and oppression of Castro. And Shannon kind of backed off of it, because that's what they do to strong black folks. There's a heat check moment. I always tell people about this heat check that white society tries to play on black people. A popular heat check question is, well, do you think all whites are racist? Now, these folks don't go and ask David Duke if he think all blacks are niggers. But they like to do that to heat check us and to try humble us. And I saw a little bit of that with Joy and Skip on that show with Shannon. And the thing people don't talk about often, this is why I list the Hispanics and Latinas as our enemies, is that a lot of Hispanics identify as white. And as a matter of fact, whether you like Castro or not, a lot of that Cubans in Miami disdain for Castro and that celebration that they did when he died, if you check it, those are white Cubans. Castro, for the most part, was a friend to black society. In his country of Cuba, of course, he was tough on anyone who dissented against what he was trying to do. And if you were black and you were in that group, well, you got treated like any other dissenter. So we have to be savage in return. We got to heat check motherfuckers too, as a matter of fact. We can't just have people heat checking us all the time, asking us questions like, do you think all whites are racist? Matter of fact, if someone asks me that question, I say yes, because the fact of the matter is all whites support the system of white supremacy. We talked about this in the past as well. You could call yourself a liberal all you want, but the truth of the matter is liberals want to keep blacks on the heel too. Remember, that was Hillary Clinton's line. The only difference is they could do without some of the gory violence that the other side has no problem with. So, that's my show today. This has been a kind of lengthy show, not our longest, but it was nice being able to talk about this topic and to shed some light on one of my favorite bits of writing, that Marcus Garvey speech on African fundamentalism. Once again, thank you for listening, and we will be back in the future with another Bitter Medicine podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.